People want to say that Days of Ruin and Kid Icarus Uprising are miraculously balanced, but can you honestly say either are such? These two games have a common problem. They make hitting first too bloody strong. This is unacceptable, and I will outline why as soon as I manage to cover each of them. Days of Ruin. The CO unit isn't inherently a bad idea. Something similar happens with Battalion Wars, and it proves very likable. But the CO unit has severe problems caused by laziness. Sure, in Battalion Wars, the manual unit's handling was almost as lazy, but Kuchu Entertainment was simply underestimating human intelligence, so what they did, because they lacked that consideration, was give the manual unit power boosts, especially defensive power boosts, because we humans can't move as fast as the AI. In reality, humans are squishy wizards. It's how we can make computers and games in the first place. And unlike the AI, we don't suffer creative sterility. Don't get me wrong, Battalion Wars is a great game. I'm just making a point that no, we don't need the defensive power boost. They're actually just bathing us when all is said and done. Of course, Days of Ruin can't try to fit in a counterbalance exploiting physical ability issues simply because of the mere gameplay. But God knows it should have managed some reasonable counterbalance. The CO unit ultimately causes attack power to be too high without acceptable penalty. Sir 96 net attack for the anti-air tank's one-hit kill on soldiers becomes considerably easier to pull, but lower-end attack power units benefit much more than they should. This is inherently a red flag because those units tend to have low attack power for a reason. The worst culprit, by and far, is the Recon. In prior Advance Wars games, Recon FTA, or First Turn Advantage if you're wondering about the abbreviation if you're viewing this for some other reason, was the cause of the starting property count on standard custom maps being only 3. Otherwise, whoever got a Recon first could harass key properties. The only way to counter was a light tank, but you'd need an economy advantage for a light tank at that stage of the game. But you couldn't get the economy advantage because the Recon would shoot your guys if they came anywhere close to touching any near center properties, while their guys was instantly safe from harassment. See how dumb that is? Does Days of Ruin address that properly? No, of course not. They have to tone it up. The base damage of the Recon versus Infantry matchup was increased from 70% to 75%. CO unit shenanigans, which are self-explanatory. Cities provide less cover. That's not a bad thing, mind. Terrain cover as a whole is weaker. Anyway, and infantry cost went from 1,000 gold to 1,500 gold. That last one, by the way, is a scrappy mechanic, even without the Recon shenanigans, as it means that you have less guys taking properties, which means less funds for stuff later on. It makes army building too freaking slow. And the 1,500 gold price tag was intended to stop infantry spam. Even if it worked at doing that, infantry spam is a problem for not being fun. 1,500 gold infantry is not fun because it kills the game's taste and turns the whole thing into glorified rock, paper, scissors. Now, excuse me for milking the Game Boy Wars 3 cow, but you know what concept Hudson involved in that game that would fix this and the still prevalent artillery spam problem? Terrain cover simply subtracting harder values from the damage. Let me explain what happens. In all of the Advanced Wars games, terrain stars cut damage by a given percentage. This favors low-end attack power units because they don't have as much damage to cut when percentages are used. In Game Boy Wars 3, damage was cut by a near exact value, more or less equivalent to a fraction of the listed cover value for the terrain type and whatnot. As a blatant example, if you had a full health unit on a city, no matter what it was, it would take 1.5 HP less HP's worth of damage. Blah. Artillery deals 4 HP's of damage to the Hunter tank. If the Hunter tank is on a city, it takes only 2 instead, actually due to truncation and lack of sub HP's, but even if it was, Even if it being 25% was relevant, that's still miles better than the Days of Ruin artillery's 55% base to the light tank, 80 plus 10% attack power, and the god-awful terrain cover. Even if artillery versus light tanks in Days of Ruin was 40%, that would still be too much due to the faulty formula. On the other side of things, the anti-air tank versus grunt matchup is a whopping 17 HP of damage. Even with capped defense boost, the grunt is simply dead if the anti-air tank is at full health and so much as looks at it funny. And that's saying something because capped defense boost is nearly 4 times as powerful as city cover. And the anti-air tank could be at 7 HP and still one-shot a city grunt. Useful. The hard value damage decreasing in tandem with the improved movement cost make it actually standard to have things on properties and makes balancing around that feasible. This weakens rushing and self-countering, the primary culprits of first turn advantage, and discourages spam and bad unit organization because you no longer want all the good tiles clogged up, kind of like how Scrabble has those spaces like double word bonus to keep you from getting overzealous with the vocabulary and end up giving the opponent good positioning. And that's a board game designed to encourage letting vocabulary flow naturally, not a strategy game where positioning and army management are the name of the game in and of itself. Here, hard value damage decreasing means that infantry do not have to cost 1500 gold to be kept out of being plausible to spam. The other imbalance I want to bring up in Days of Ruin, the artillery. Why do they cost 6,000 gold when the net attack for price required for one hit kill is excessive? And just in case they're not funny enough, they freaking destroy tanks in fewer attacks than they should. The anti-tank becomes redundant junk because of that idiocy. That thing can't even one-shot anything and it gets crippled to uselessness easily by 2 medium tanks that have sub 100 net attack? What? I'm sorry, but even though you're not as bad as Dual Strike, Days of Ruin, fail! There's more imbalances too. I barely scratched the surface of this, but this part is taking too long. But yeah, Days of Ruin's balance is that much of a joke. And yes, I would want to see car units akin to the ones in Game Boy War 3 be around in Advance Wars 5. It's not like they'd be bad for the balance. Soldiers would get nerfed by the car's existence. Recons would have to be nerfed because of their sudden mid-game purpose, but they deserve to be nerfed anyway. And at least now they won't become junk because of a deserved nerf. Tanks would have to be toned up a bit to survive Humvee age, but heaven knows they needed bloody jump to begin with. And ranged fire units would end up being vulnerable to Humvee blitzes, so having them be less polarizing would be such a nightmare. I can't think of anything bad, maybe overly versatile air units, but even then fixing them costs too problems. Excuse me for a second. You'd have to excuse me having gone motor mouth there, but I still don't know what exactly that door opening closing was about. Could have been involving the woman's bathroom. My room in this place is right across from... Yeah, I totally need another bloody mockery that says I could never be happily married. Not like stupidity like what happened a couple of weeks back is bad enough. Oh my god. As for Kid Icarus Uprising, I had hopes that the game would prove balanced. It had some good ideas going, but no. Project Sora had to do some stupid, idiotic things that I will never understand. Like, why does the dash around have so many invincibility frames? That results in it being able to break Black Hole apart right from the inside without any power or mod support. That alone kills the game's balance by making Black Hole junk and its very purpose. Black Hole's concept adds a lot of much needed depth and fixes various problems, but with it being mocked by things that shouldn't be doing that at all, it's all meaningless. And the game proves imbalanced anyway. Tell me again why energy charge exists. To reward you for not getting hit, something that inevitably favors speedsters? At best, that should have been checked severely. 8 space minimum is insufficient for doing that. The fact that energy charge gives you attack power, plus 80% at that, just for having hit a... The fact remains that energy charge gives you the attack power just for having the hit evade advantage. 80% at that. Everything about that screams abuse. It should have been neutered. It should have neutered the user's mobility so that they couldn't avoid being hit as easily or anything. But no, there's no penalty and too much attack power. Also, attack power is ignored defenses. Yeah, whose idea was that? Tell me this math sounds like it should be on Mega Laser, a power that easily hits whoever you want, whenever you want, while ignoring defensive power mods. The max health any fighter has is 342 HPs when they have health plus 6, the maximum health plus mod. Mega Laser deals 6 damage per hit. The combination of power attack plus 3 and energy charge multiplies that by 10 surge. So that's 20 damage per hit. And Mega Laser in one charge can easily hit somebody who isn't particularly mobile at least 9 times! That's 180 damage, certainly surpassing half of the 342 required. And it ignores defense? There's no way anybody could have playtested the game and viewed that as balanced. And that's the only attack power that could even be better against speedsters and snipers than power guys. All the others just plain suck at catching either or preferably both. And get weapons, please! Take stronger penalties for fighting at a distance. Most of them have deal at least 60% of their minimum range damage at maximum range. It should have been more like 40%, maybe 30%. 60% is simply too high. It's not fair that the Skyscraper Club has to have the second lowest max range damage multiplier in the entire game. I wish I was exaggerating. When it has trouble even sniping anything halfway mobile without power support. And everything else still deals practically full damage from 9,001 miles away. And believe me, this is just scratching the surface. These in fact aren't even on the paper I have for recommended bans, because they're recently brought up issues. That's how bad the balance is, and it's so bad that it prevents things from, like grid rating from hoping to evolve. Kid Icarus Uprising. Fail! Now, you might be wondering, what the heck is the big deal with defensive power? Well, okay, sure, defensive power shouldn't be mindless, that's true. But neither should it be bad at all. It already has natural counters, such that once it's no longer mindless, you'd have to try in order to make sure it's broken, because believe me, it's still going to be weaker than it seems in general. If anything, better defensive power tones up various things by creating their sudden usefulness. The most important thing is that it's very good as a testing attribute for creativity. Armor busting things should indeed be terrible, and that's terrible with quote marks. I'll get to that in just a moment. But by having armor busting things be bad, the player would want to consider other armor busting options, and eventually get their armor buster to link together in perfect harmony. Usually the armor busters are actually good because of secondary attributes that allow their usage to flow naturally. That's the key to good balance. Step 1, make it required to use armor busting to hope to kill any competent foe with armor. Step 2, make the armor busting itself seem to be subpar at best at its intended purpose. And step 3, give the armor busting the tools to be useful outside destroying armor guys. People will bother with armor because it actually does its job, and people will want to get creative to make the armor busting usage less draining. But of course, companies like Nintendo would never care to do this. As long as they keep raking in the money, they can just stick to working with their big names like Mario or Zelda to produce games with shoddy regard to balance. Look no further than Super Smash Bros. And its unconditional flinching shenanigans. The disregard to step 1 of what I said about the key to good balance results in the abrasive players who find nothing cheap about what they do, being the ones who get rewarded, while the ones who play for cleaner entertainment get the shaft. And it doesn't seem like Super Smash Bros. 4 is going to fix that problem anytime soon, despite what they're promising. And meanwhile, Fire Emblem, you'd think a strategy game would not become all about pwn fest and fan service, except on the highest difficulty level of the new game. Dear God, at best that is horribly imbalanced. And at worst, just getting through is outright luck-based, and that's actually assuming you're abusing game breakers. And this, after 12 games, where speed is everything, if you don't have speed, you're out of luck. Unbelievable. And I already talked about Advance Wars and Kid Icarus. I think it's fair to say that Nintendo's track record as of late has not been good at all. And Metroid Other M is just a blatant example of what I'm talking about. That game requires its own video, believe me, but when this is supposed to be two games that are already individually pushing on that, and neither of which have been complained about much. But they sure as heck deserve it. What I am trying to say is, there is virtually plenty of benefit and little to no drawback to making defensive power useful outside it being broken, especially when defensive power, mindless though it seems, actually supports the mere point of a game. Yeah, just a surprise to you. Excuse me, I have a game of my own to work on. The panda-type monster allies are the current stubborn handling the balance in it.